The day I signed away my inheritance was cold and gray, fitting for both a funeral and a betrayal. My brother Michael stood over me, his expensive suit perfectly pressed, watching as I held the pen with trembling fingers. "It's just paperwork, Alice," he said smoothly, that familiar condescending smile on his face. Dad wanted everything to go smoothly after he was gone. You know how he felt about family disputes. I did know. Our father, James Harrison, had built Harrison Technologies from nothing, turning it into a multi-million-dollar company through sheer determination and brilliant innovation. He'd always said his greatest fear was his children fighting over his legacy. My hand hovered over the signature line. I should have my lawyer look at this first. Michael's smile tightened slightly. "Come on, Al. We just buried Dad. Do you really want to drag lawyers into this? Trust me, this is what he wanted." Trust me. Those words had been Michael's mantra our entire lives. Trust me to tell Mom and Dad who really broke the window. Trust me to explain why their credit card bill was so high. Trust me to handle the family business while you pursue your little art career. I was 32 years old, and I still couldn't say no to my older brother. I signed. The moment the pen left the paper, Michael snatched up the contract, his facade of brotherly concern vanishing. Finally, "God, you're still so gullible, Alice. Some things never change." "What are you talking about?" He was already tucking the contract into his briefcase, barely containing his glee. "Did you even read what you just signed? You just gave up everything, your share of the company, your claim to any family assets, even Dad's house. It's all mine now." The world tilted sideways as his words sank in. "That's not possible. Dad would. Dad's dead," Michael cut in sharply. "And he just signed a legally binding contract giving me full control of everything he left behind. Maybe if he'd spent less time playing with paintbrushes and more time learning about business, you wouldn't be so easy to manipulate." I sat there in our father's study, surrounded by his books, his awards, the life he'd built, while my brother effectively erased my claim to any of it. The worst part was, I'd let him do it. "Why?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "We're family, Michael. Why would you do this?" He paused at the door, adjusting his tie with manicured fingers. "Because I can. Because I've spent my entire life watching Dad try to make you into something you're not, a businesswoman, a leader, someone worthy of the Harrison name. I've earned this, Alice. All you've earned is the reality check you're getting right now." With that, he left, his footsteps echoing through the empty house that was now his. I didn't cry, not then. I sat in Dad's leather chair, breathing in the lingering scent of his cologne, and thought about all the signs I'd missed over the years. Michael had always been the responsible one, the son who followed in Dad's footsteps while I pursued my passion for art. But there had been moments, small glimpses of something darker beneath his perfect exterior. The way he'd manipulate situations to his advantage, the subtle digs at my choices, the constant reminder that he was the one Dad really relied on. Dad had tried to warn me in his own way. During his final weeks in the hospital, he'd been insistent about me coming to see him alone, without Michael. But every time I visited, Michael was there, hovering, making sure we were never truly alone. The safe, Dad had whispered during one of his more lucid moments. "Alice, you need to check the safe." But before he could say more, Michael had returned with a nurse, and the moment was gone. 3 days later, Dad was gone too. Now, sitting in his study, I looked at the painting I'd done of him years ago, hanging above the fireplace. He looked strong there, vibrant, his eyes twinkling with the intelligence that had built an empire. What would he think of me now, letting Michael take everything with a single signature? My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Movers will be here tomorrow. Get whatever personal items you want. Everything else stays." I started to respond, then stopped. What was the point? He'd won just like he always did. I was the artistic dreamer, the one who'd never quite fit into the Harrison mold of ambitious achievers. Maybe this was karma's way of confirming what Michael had always said. I didn't deserve the Harrison legacy. I gathered a few photos, some of Dad's books he particularly loved, and the painting I'd done. As I was leaving, something caught my eye, a small scratch on the frame of Dad's safe hidden behind his desk. The safe had always been off limits. Family business, Dad would say whenever I asked about it. Michael had the combination, of course. He had everything now. But that scratch. It looked fresh, like someone had recently tried to open it and failed. Dad's words echoed in my head. Alice, you need to check the safe. I touched the metal door gently, feeling its cold solidity. What secrets did it hold? And why had Dad been so insistent about me seeing it? The next few weeks passed in a blur. Michael wasted no time asserting his control over Harrison Technologies. He fired longtime employees, restructured departments, and began steering the company away from the innovative research Dad had loved toward more immediately profitable ventures. I retreated to my small art studio across town, throwing myself into my work. Painting had always been my escape, my way of processing emotions too complex for words. Now it became my lifeline. One afternoon, about a month after the funeral, I received an unexpected visitor. Margaret Chen, Dad's longtime assistant, stood at my studio door, looking nervous. Alice, she said quietly, glancing over her shoulder, we need to talk about your father, and about Michael. I let her in, noting how her hands trembled as she clutched her purse. Margaret had been with Harrison Technologies for over 20 years. She'd watched Michael and me grow up, had been more of a mother to us than our own mom, who left when we were young. Michael fired me yesterday, she said, sitting down heavily on my paint-splattered couch. Said the company was moving in a new direction, needed fresh blood. I'm so sorry, I started, but she waved me off. This isn't about my job. It's about your father. There are things you need to know, things he tried to tell you before. She paused, taking a deep breath. Your father knew what Michael was planning. He discovered some irregularities in the company accounts, transfers of money that couldn't be explained. When he confronted Michael, things got ugly. My heart started pounding. What are you saying? I'm saying your brother has been embezzling from the company for years. Your father was gathering evidence, keeping it in the safe. I finished, the pieces starting to click into place. Margaret nodded. That's why he wanted to see you alone. He changed the combination just before he went into the hospital. He wanted you to have it, not Michael. But I don't have the combination, I said, feeling that familiar sense of helplessness. And even if I did, Michael owns everything now. I signed it all away. A small smile crossed Margaret's face. Did you? Are you sure about that? She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick envelope. Your father gave me this, told me to hold on to it until the right time. I think that time is now. Inside the envelope were documents, financial records, bank statements, emails between Michael and offshore accounts. But most importantly, there was a letter from Dad, dated just 2 weeks before his death. My dearest Alice, it began, if you're reading this, then things have happened as I feared they would. Michael has always been ambitious, but somewhere along the way, ambition turned to greed. He's not the son I thought I knew, and I fear what he might do when I'm gone. The contract he'll try to make you sign? It's worthless. I've already filed my official will with the family lawyer, Mr. Patterson. Everything is split equally between you and Michael, as it should be. But the evidence of what your brother has done, the proof of his crimes against our company and our family, that's in the safe, and only you can access it now. The combination isn't numbers, Alice. It's letters. Your mother's name, Elizabeth, followed by the date you first showed me one of your paintings. You were 6 years old, and it was the moment I realized you had a gift that was just as valuable as any business acumen. Don't let your brother destroy what we built. Don't let him twist your kind heart into thinking you deserve less than an equal share of your inheritance. I love you, my artistic girl. Show Michael what true strength looks like. Love, Dad. I read the letter 3 times, tears blurring my vision. All this time, I thought Dad had favored Michael, had seen my art as a hobby rather than a calling. But he'd been protecting me, preparing for this moment. What do I do now? I asked Margaret, my voice shaking. She squeezed my hand. Now you show your brother that being underestimated can be the greatest advantage of all. I waited 3 days before making my move. 3 days of watching Michael parade around Dad's company like a king who just claimed his throne. 3 days of gathering my courage and planning my next steps. The security guard at Harrison Technologies still remembered me, still smiled, and waved me through despite Michael's new strict visitor policy. Some loyalties, it seemed, ran deeper than a change in management. It was late evening when I entered Dad's old office. Michael had already moved in, of course. The painting I'd done was gone, replaced by generic modern art. Dad's beloved books had been cleared out to make room for sleek industry awards. But the safe was still there, hidden behind the same oak panel it had always been behind. My hands trembled as I input the combination. Elizabeth, my mother's name. Then 061,996, June 19, 1996, the day I'd proudly shown Dad my first real painting. A cat, badly proportioned but full of the energy only a 6-year-old could capture. The safe clicked open. "What the hell are you doing here?" I spun around to find Michael in the doorway, his face twisted with rage. He must have been working late, though I suspected he'd been watching the security feeds, waiting for this moment. "Hello, brother," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Just picking up some things Dad left for me." He stalked into the office, trying to intimidate me with his height like he had since we were kids. "You signed away any right to anything in this office. Get out before I call security." I stood my ground. "Actually, I don't think I did. Sign away my rights, that is. You see, I've been doing some reading. About contract law, about inheritance rights, about fraud." His step faltered slightly. "What are you talking about? Did you really think Dad wouldn't protect me from you?" I reached into the safe and pulled out a thick folder. "He knew what you were doing, Michael. The money you've been stealing, the accounts in the Caymans, all of it." The color drained from his face. "You're lying. Dad trusted me with everything." "Did he? Is that why he changed the safe combination before he died? Why he tried so hard to talk to me alone in the hospital?" I opened the folder, letting him see the contents: bank statements, transfer records, emails he thought he'd deleted. "It's all here, Michael. Every crime, every betrayal, every cent you stole from Dad's company." He lunged for the folder, but I stepped back, quick and ready. This time, I wouldn't let him bully me. "Don't," I said sharply. "Copies are already with the family lawyer, and the SEC. Touch me, and they go public immediately." Michael's hands clenched into fists. "You wouldn't dare. It would destroy the company." "No, it would destroy you. The company will survive under new management." I pulled out another document from the folder. Dad's real will, properly notarized and filed with multiple law firms. "Funny thing about that contract you made me sign. It's pretty hard to sign away an inheritance that's protected by multiple legal safeguards." "This is ridiculous," he sputtered, but I could see the fear in his eyes. "You don't know anything about running a company. You're an artist, for God's sake." "I'm a Harrison," I corrected him. "And unlike you, I actually paid attention to Dad's lessons about integrity and innovation." "Did you really think all those hours I spent in his office, painting while he worked, were wasted?" "I learned everything, by watching, by listening, by caring about more than just profit." The truth hit him then, and he sank into Dad's chair, no, my chair now. "What do you want?" "Simple. You're going to resign as CEO, effective immediately. You'll return every cent you stole with interest, and you'll never come near this company again." "And if I refuse?" I smiled, thinking of all the times he used that same smug expression against me. "Then I let the SEC handle it. I'm sure they'd be very interested in some of these offshore transactions." He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something I'd never seen in my brother's eyes before. Respect tinged with fear. "When?" he finally asked. "When did you get so calculated?" "I've always been calculated, Michael. I just expressed it through art instead of numbers." "But you never bothered to look closely at my paintings, did you? Never noticed how each brush stroke was carefully planned, how every color was precisely chosen? You saw what you wanted to see, a dreamy little sister who could be easily manipulated." I gathered the documents, tucking them safely away. "You have until tomorrow morning to draft your resignation. After that, everything goes public." As I turned to leave, he called out, "Alice, did Dad really change the safe combination to your painting date?" I paused at the door. "He did, because he knew you'd never remember it. You never thought art was important enough to pay attention to." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of change. Michael resigned, citing personal reasons and a desire to pursue other opportunities. The money he'd stolen was quietly returned. The board, upon reviewing Dad's will and the circumstances of Michael's departure, voted unanimously to install me as CEO. It wasn't easy. There were whispers, doubts, concerns about an artist running a tech company. But I had something Michael never did: Dad's vision for what Harrison Technologies could be. Under my leadership, we returned to the innovative research Dad had loved. I brought back the employees Michael had fired, including Margaret, who became my chief of staff. And I turned Dad's old office back into the space I remembered. Books, warmth, and yes, my painting back above the fireplace. 6 months after taking over, I received a letter from Michael. He was in Europe, he said, finding himself. The letter was full of apologies, explanations, excuses, but one line stood out. You were right about the paintings. I finally looked, really looked, at the one you did of Dad. There's more complexity there than I ever gave you credit for. More than just brushstrokes and colors. There's strategy, planning, vision. Just like in business, I should have seen it sooner. I hung his letter next to Dad's in my office, 2 reminders of how appearances can deceive. The artistic dreamer had become a CEO. The perfect son had become a cautionary tale. Last week, during a board meeting, someone asked me if it was hard, switching from art to business. I looked around the room, at the innovations we were developing, the lives we were changing, the legacy we were building, and smiled. I never switched, I said. I just found a bigger canvas. Later that evening, I sat in Dad's chair, my chair now, and looked at the safe behind the panel. The combination was still the same. My mother's name and the date of my first painting. A reminder that sometimes the most valuable things we inherit aren't money or companies, but the lessons our parents try to teach us. Michael had seen the Harrison legacy as something to possess. I saw it as something to preserve and grow, like a painting that's never quite finished, always evolving with each new brush stroke. Dad understood that. He'd known that true strength isn't about domination or control. It's about vision, patience, and the courage to create something meaningful. He protected me not because I was weak, but because he saw in me the same creative spirit that had helped him build Harrison Technologies in the first place. Now, sitting in his office, surrounded by the blend of art and innovation that defined both our lives, I finally understood what he'd been trying to tell me all along. Sometimes the best business decisions come from an artist's heart. The company continues to grow, but differently now. We've started a foundation that supports young artists and inventors, believing that creativity and commerce can coexist. Every year, we display new artwork in our headquarters, including pieces from emerging artists who remind me of myself at that age, full of dreams and uncertain of their place in the world. And in my office, next to the painting of Dad, hangs a new piece I recently completed. It shows 2 paths diverging, one straight and corporate, the other winding and artistic. But unlike in real life, in my painting they eventually merge, creating something stronger and more beautiful than either path alone. Michael saw it last month during his first visit back to the office. He stood there for a long time, just looking, before finally turning to me with tears in his eyes. I get it now, he said quietly. What Dad saw in you. What I was too blind to see. I hugged him then, feeling the weight of our shared history and the possibility of a different future. It's never too late to learn to see things differently, I told him. He's working at a small tech startup now, starting over from the bottom. Sometimes he calls to ask for advice, and I give it, knowing that the greatest revenge isn't in punishment, but in growth, his and mine. The safe behind the panel holds different documents now. Plans for the future, ideas for new innovations, sketches for paintings I'll create when I find the time. But I've never changed the combination. Some things, like the memory of a little girl proudly showing her father a painting of a cat, are worth preserving exactly as they are.